Have you ever seen those amazing little drawings and watercolors online and wondered how to do them? You can follow along and get the idea on how to take a line drawing, one that you've gotten from me at tamery.com, or your own little sketch, and learn how to paint architecture and little details. So grab your paint supplies and let's get started. I've got my colors here. They're straight out of my Woodlands box, so you want to go ahead and prepare some of the colors you'd like to do for, as an example, a few roofs, trim color, some doors, obviously some natural colors and greens, and depending on how you want to do your tree, what season you'd like. So go ahead and prep those if you'd like right now, or you can pause at any time and paint along with me. Okay, so let's just get started from left to right here and work on this mansion. I am taking this color straight out of my box here, and I'm going to make this nice little green roof, kind of a green blue, sort of mimicking that kind of copper color that develops over time on a copper roof. And I'm going to go ahead right now and put in with a very fine tip of this brush. I'm using a water brush right here so that I don't have to dip into a water cup, and I use this for most everything. I have a few different sizes. This is the small brush. I sell them online at my site. So we've got that, and we'll just clear it right here and dip into the next one and do this little trim piece up here. And I'll go ahead and do this one here, and I don't want to do too much because I've got to do my background and those may bleed, so I want to make sure to get those in. This is tiny, tiny little stuff. If you've got a bigger drawing, more space, it's a little easier to do. But I'm going to go around and almost like a marker, get the fine tip of this watercolor brush in here. If you're not sure how to get started on watercolors, I do have a basics video where you can learn how watercolor works, and I highly recommend doing those because I don't cover them in these videos. I'm just showing you how I'm painting a line drawing. I'm almost using this like a marker, and you know that your pigment is the strongest in your first few strokes here when you're laying that down because they're loaded up into the tip of your brush. And if you've got too much, you can just kind of move that around. If you've got too much water in your brush, you can clear it off and still move that paint around. So those are a couple little tips there. And I'm going to paint this little area here. And I've got this mansion in a couple different ways. So if you're buying my Taken paints, it's a bigger version. I've got the fall one with little pumpkins out front, or just an any season one as well. And it's fun to get these houses and just sort of see how, if you get a group of friends together, to see how everybody paints theirs just a little bit differently, because you get to be the architect in a way. Okay, so we've got some of that trim. I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to move on to this tree right here while I'm waiting for that to dry. And I'm using a little bit of gray. And this tree isn't a particular type of tree, although it's kind of got a birch look if I'm doing it in this gray. And I'm not filling it all in. I'm leaving white of the paper there that'll dry and leave some nice little markings. And you can see right here, I went out of the lines, and I'm just going to take my clean brush and scrub it out a little bit and then go straight down and sort of stamp that away. Some colors are easier to get up than others, and I'm going to go around that with a darker color in a bit anyway, and it'll cover that up. And I've made this kind of multicolor for fall time, and you can obviously do this for spring, so it's totally up to you with artistic license. I'm just kind of moving around my sketch so that I've got a variety of colors of leaves, and some trees do lose their leaves in succession of colors, so that's kind of fun and whimsical. The trick to watercolor is to make sure to let the paint set up and dry. I'm using a very fine line here, and I suggest you pull toward yourself. Your hand is more steady. Make sure you don't have paint over here. You might make a mark. I kind of lost it there along that line. You can always correct like I showed you earlier, or if it's too bad, you can always go in and create other lines. And I really want to go inside of that with a light blue, so I'm going to let that dry so that I can do that later. I do sell these things on my website. If you're interested, you can find any paints online and mix up the colors that you want. I do have videos about how to mix colors in case you're new and not sure how to do that. Now I'm going to move back over to this house, and I'm choosing like kind of a sandy stucco color this time. I think I used like a gray in one of the other mansion ones, and I'm hoping that's actually dry, so I guess we'll just see and find out. For the video's sake, I'm moving along, but you may want to just, go get a cup of tea and wait for pieces to dry if you're being patient, or put layers in on one day and come back the next. It's nice because with these little travel kits and such, you can just pack it up and bring it out very easily. I also paint acrylic, and it's not so much that way. Lots of cleanup and lots of setup. So watercolor is a great way to just be able to be creative in a quick and easy way. Going to go carefully around these little scallops here. Typically, I would do the background first. I think I show that in other videos, so I think that makes the most sense. If you are painting along, it's too late, but if you are watching first, I think I would do the house first and then add that afterward. In case you're not sure, you can be too careful. You really want a fine brush on something this small. And you can take so much time on this and really enjoy it. So go ahead and pause the video at any point to paint along. Just kind of giving an impression of glass. It always has that reflection, so it kind of bounces the light back almost as a white. So you don't want to fill the whole thing in all the way across, or just won't look as good. And let's get this little window up here so it's coming along. We'll come back in and fill in some more details after that dries. I think I need to get this up here. Perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and work on this house. So I'm going to actually create a kind of purple here, lavender, for some of my flowers. So my brush was really loaded with water, and it's beating up. So I'm just going to siphon that a little into my paper towel. You can blot it, but if you've got other colors happening or other wet paint, you don't want to ruin what you're doing. So I just siphoned that, because although it would just dry, it's a liability if it sits there too wet. I could get my hand in it later. So that one's pretty wet. I'll show you what happens when it just goes ahead and dries. You don't have to worry about it. And I'm going to kind of go with these lines here in the architecture. And it may not matter the direction, but kind of paying attention to that, because it's kind of an impression you're creating. A neutral here for that foundation. Okay, I'm going to go in here and just paint that. It's kind of tricky because that flower's so wet. I don't want to go around that just yet. I'm just going to because the drawing style is so whimsical, I'm not being super meticulous. You can make up your own mind, but a lot of these sketchy paintings that you see online and maybe have a little trouble emulating is maybe you're getting too particular and it doesn't come out sort of a little bit like you're just sort of painting it. I'm standing across the street and painting it as I'm looking at it. I'm not going to do all those little details. So that's the kind of vibe or look you would get. Now I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to make this door. Let me test it out. If you get my Take and Paints, I give you a little strip. And if you're wondering what that's for, it's for this, where you get to test out your colors before you put them on your paper, just to make sure they're the right intensity that you want. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit of this lighter sand color here. I didn't really get, sometimes I get a nice little line across the edges just to make it pop a little bit, and usually then I'll pull some of that pigment off of that line actually before I even paint that. So I'm going to add that back in so that it has the dimension that I'm used to. Okay, that one is coming out really nicely. I'm going to add a little bit of color in here, and it's okay if I don't go all the way around. Look like the sun is hitting it at a different angle. And put a little stoop there. Okay, so you can see this purple has kind of, let me go up close there, it's sort of dried now. The water's evaporated, it's left that color, so it's good now. As a little detail, pulling toward myself, you can always practice on a piece of paper first if you're not sure how steady your hand is. You may want to pick a motif that has less small lines if you're worried about it. I always like pulling toward myself. I feel like my hand is more steady than going that direction. And now I'm going to add this little frame right here. Makes me think, this one kind of makes me think of, I took a trip to Amsterdam in high school as a graduation trip. I was a senior, headed to SCAD the next year, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design, and they had art from all over the world from Vincent van Gogh as a celebration of his 100 years, and that was so awesome. Went to the Rijksmuseum, the Anne Frank house. That was a cool trip. And then we went on a train down to Paris and see the Louvre, if I'm saying that right and being very French, and the Mona Lisa and all of that. So this little picture kind of looks like Old Town USA a little bit of Dutch Holland, a little bit of Italy maybe. So who knows, maybe this is a very diverse neighborhood where each culture is represented in one street. They're kind of doing that these days with some of the custom home areas where I saw a house yesterday that was like the Spanish inspired and right next door to your typical southern brick house. They had palm trees out front. You know, it's kind of this look but in mansion style, and so it's kind of fun to not have the cookie cutter in just one neighborhood. Now I'm just adding that glass look here. That's a little intense. I would probably add more water. I think I got from the wrong place. But I like it. It's fun. It's poppy. Okay, so now we're on to our last one over here. So I'm going to do the roof, maybe do a little bit of the ground while that's drying. If you have my tropicals set, then you can use like the hibiscus, which is an orange color, and a little bit of brown. It makes a nice terracotta. So if you have similar colors in your box, that's what I would mix to get those going. Really don't have any more terracotta on this, so I'm going to go back and kind of add a little more pigment, because I think I can manage not to put my hand in that, so we'll just see. One of the biggest mistakes I learned when I first started doing watercolor was just not being patient enough and painting something right next to something else, and it bled, ruined it. I mean, I worked so hard to draw up that little drawing, and then bam, it was just ruined in an instant. So I didn't know how to kind of erase at the time, so I was devastated. But, and I am like totally exaggerating, I wasn't devastated, it was just like a cute little bear, but for like a kid's painting. But that and taking your hand and dragging it into it. I had a lady in a class one time finish her whole bouquet, and then her hair went across her painting. So she was like, after 2 hours sitting in my class, and she had such a beautiful painting, was like, oh my God. So some of it we were able to clean up, and the rest of it I was just able to create another spray of flowers, like a stem, to make it look like it was, and create like a little bud to make it look like it was part of the original design. So she ended up with a more unique piece than the rest of her friends that were in the group. So we made it into a happy little accident. All was well at the end. I'm going to use a little bit of this gray for this stucco here. Pull this down this direction and keeping my hand out of that paint over there. I'm clearing my brush, and it's one of my favorite things to do is then to kind of just put water. That's what's great about these little water brushes. You can just kind of squeeze water into it, which gives you a little bit more control, especially for these little areas and line paintings. Okay, now I'm going to pull that away, kind of giving that stucco look. I have this one as a larger take. All 3 of these I have in a larger take and paint, and I just thought it'd be fun to put them all together into one. Give you more things to work on. But it's small though. Tell people to bring their glasses for my classes. Use kind of a brown up here also. And I'm loosely finding these lines where the architecture is kind of hard to see. When I went to SCAD in Savannah, they have all these beautiful parks. If you haven't been, it's one of the most organized cities because Oglethorpe planned it out ahead of time with all these circles, and it's just gorgeous. So I prefer Savannah over Charleston, which is usually people's first pick. And we would sit in those squares with huge pads of, they called it trash paper, cheap paper, and we would just sketch the homes or storefronts that we would see, and would just sit on the ground and do that. I don't even know how I was able to sit on the ground for that long, honestly. Oh, to be young. And so this reminds me of that. We would do loose drawings in either charcoal. I don't know if we used pens, so it's very loose. So this kind of makes me think of, trying to think about being kind of loose, not super specific. Just to kind of start thinking about what we're looking at and what stands out to us. You may decide to pick on, oh, that's a blue. Did not mean to do that. It's supposed to be black. And you want to just, when you're sketching architecture, you can be really loose with it, kind of find those things that you think will work in balance. Maybe not everything you see, but things that you feel like will work well together. Kind of edit it as you're drawing. And it's fun to do on, like I said, that trash paper, because you can just flip the page and start over if it's not working. Okay, so we're going to put in, oh, everything's running together here. I'm going to put in some of this glass here. You could even kind of act like there's curtains in there and draw that in. If you use pencil, if you paint over the pencil, it will not erase. So if you're using pencil, I suggest you kind of lighten your lines before you paint with a kneaded eraser. And I say that because it won't leave all those little filaments. I cover that in the basics video if you watch that, so you get the idea on how to use the tools. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of details here, and then I'll go back and do those leaves, and we'll be done. So if you're looking for a little more realistic, you might want to add a few extra layers around, as you see me doing here. Saying, okay, not doing everything, but picking a few places to just kind of come in and add a little bit of layering with a line in a little bit. And my bricks up here, I'm going to definitely go and just tap in a little bit of color. I'm not filling the whole brick, and that way it gives it that multi-tone look that brick has. And I've got a little, this shadow color, which is like a very light black. I'm gonna, where did I put that? Come along here, maybe here, and that eave alongside there. And the bottom of where these bricks are, maybe the top or the stuccos come apart. Obviously come in and add more shadow, especially once it's already dry. And once you get good at practicing, you won't feel maybe as nervous that you might mess your drawing up if you don't do a good job with the shadow. And I always suggest to people to hold your painting away from yourself for a minute, just to kind of get kind of looking at it so up close that we sort of lose sight of what we're looking at. I'm going to just tone that down a little, add a little more blue in there. Maybe it made it brighter, I don't know. Okay, now we just have these leaves, and I've just used all the green that I had made up for it. This is more of a blue green, so I always add this yellowy color to it. So my other box, the greens are more yellow, and so I add brown to them. You can add a black to like kind of a true green, or you can mix up a little bit of red to kind of deepen your color. But you have to kind of know what your green is you're starting with. Is it more yellow, more blue? And that'll help you know what to sort of mix into it to, like for this, I wanted more of a hunter green. Pink or red or purple in there. So there you go.